This is your Chargers linebacker, Daiyan Henley, and you're tuning in with Chargers Unleashed.
Welcome to a special live edition of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Daiyan Wolkenstein here with you from the LAFB Network. Today's show, of course, being brought to you by BetOnline Athletic. I almost lost it there for a second, Dan. I did actually lose it for a second, believe it or not. Woo! Talk about just a day that
we're live.
Everything. Yes, totally out of everything. That is probably the first time on a live show that I have ever just fumbled the entire ad read. But if this is your first time tuning to the show, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Daiyan Wolkenstein, obviously, in the first 5 seconds of the show, I'm not ready for it. But I'm going to shift it over to you because you seem like you're ready to talk. I know everybody in the comment section is ready to talk.
Yes. Welcome to Chargers Unleashed. I will finish it for you, Jake. This episode is brought to you by Athletic Greens, Rock Solid Sports Memorabilia, Aura, Mint Mobile.
And so online.
See, gonna get there in a bit.
See? You gotta get them all. And
yes,
leave it to me. Maybe I'm still feeling jet lagged from my vacation that I fumbled that up. But happy to also have join us, Mr. Ryan Daiyan, of course, from the LAFB Network. We're gonna bring him in here in just a second. But Dan, it's game day. I know we're all kind of braving the weather of what's taking place right now. What is up, Ryan? How's it going, sir?
What's up? Sorry, guys. Was a scramble to get on here and had to make myself a hot toddy in honor of Jake being back from vacay. So, but made it. So thanks for having me and excited to talk Chargers ball.
Jake is quite the hot toddy. I agree. You're with him. Look,
sure is.
We all know how these Chargers Unleashed live shows go. They can sometimes go off the rails, but you know what? That's what we're all here for. The virtual tailgate. Look, we all have nothing better to do. LA seems to be getting shut down rather quickly. Due to hurricane or tropical storm Hillary. So fun times happening here on Chargers Unleashed. This is live. You know the deal. Put the comments, questions, topics, you name it in the chat. We'll do our best to kind of bring them up live as we go. Ryan Daiyan repping the fourth and Staley. We got to talk about that here in a bit. If we're going to see
it's time to bring it back.
Yes. Before we go further, though, let's bring in some of the comments here. The Daz Boo asked a question about Josh Palmer, which we'll get to here in a second. We have Athir asking questions. Let's go preseason number 2. He's asking a question about the message. I didn't get it, so Athir, please give it again. Scott Childs is in here. URL Jordan is here. Alpha Man's in here. GTR Man, Bolt Maniac, Jeff Gray, Jorge Rodriguez, Bolted Ashaman, Richard Vargas. Shout out to all you guys. Man, I can't keep up with this. Big Buddha, it's Mother Bolton game day. Let's use that as the jump off point. Gentlemen, lots to discuss. We'll talk about joint practice day 1 and 2, but it's game day. Chargers are playing the Saints, at least as of 1:05 p.m. Pacific time they are. How are we feeling about this game? Well, each of you, biggest storyline going into this game is what?
I think you could take this either one of two ways. Either things that we didn't get a chance to see week 1 of the preseason games, or things that we would like to continue seeing to develop in a good way. Obviously, the run game was the standout storyline of last week's game, with the Chargers having Joshua Kelly, Isaiah Spiller, and Elijah Dotson run the ball the way that they did. That was a great sight to see from obviously something that we know that Kellen Moore and this offense want to improve on. Things to also continue. I mean, I'm enjoying seeing Easton Stick throwing the ball. I never thought that sentence would actually come out of my mouth, but as good as he looked last week, I'm ready for that trend to continue. You'd hopefully like to see John Hightower play in this game, considering that he is kind of right on that cusp of the wide receiver 6 spot. And given the fact that he wasn't able to play last week, definitely want to see him in there. Expect to see a lot of JT Woods in this game, considering that Alohi Gilman is nursing his injury. I would not bet that Mark Webb is going to see the game today, not just because I don't think that he can play, but Staley probably will err on the side of caution, given the fact that he went out during the Saints joint practice earlier this week. So you're going to see a lot of him, probably a lot of Raheem Lane as well. Those are some of the ones that just jump off the top of the head to me.
Yeah, I'll just I'll piggyback off one of them, because for me, the biggest group I'm watching is that safety room, just because of the depth after Derwin and Lowy's banged up. You mentioned Webb's banged up. So, I mean, they're running out of guys there. And obviously last week, that was like, if you look at any negatives from last week's game, which there wasn't many, it was kind of the safety depth play. We talked about it, Dan, after the game a bunch, and JT Woods, I thought, got better as the game went on, but obviously Mark Webb struggled. So that's my biggest thing, is just watching how that safety group plays, and then kind of watching the running backs in terms of, can they keep stacking up improvement? I mean, the running game, obviously 220 yards or whatever it was last week. And so we talked about, Dan, how, we covered the Rams here on this network, but Rams, essentially without Aaron Donald, not a very good front seven. No Ernest Jones, no Aaron Donald last week. Not a very good and deep front seven. So can they do it again against probably a better competition? And obviously we're still in preseason, so they're not seeing the starters anyway, but it's still going to be an improvement. So those are my two big things to see in those groups.
Yes, and for what it's worth, Raiders lit up the Rams as well during preseason. So the Chargers aren't the only ones. One question. Jorge, first off, comes in here. It's August, bro. The theme, starting from May, I think, is when Jake started doing this. It's May, bro. And then it got to June, and that was when the draft was able to be behind us. And then it got to preseason, and now it's August, which means, like, we got football next month. Bolted Ashawn, which I think this is, I don't know if I'm misspelling that correct. Ashaman. Oh, Ashaman. There you go. Jake, I need to have you start reading the names, because I am bloody awful.
Have you forgotten, especially when we get into draft season, how horrible I am at pronouncing names?
That's true. Okay.
It's like,
all right.
Just remember,
Ryan.
Dan, there is someone worse than you. And that's
Ryan, you can butcher it for me. What's his name? Bolted Ashaman? Ashaman?
That's what I would say. Yeah.
All right. Can't wait to see Dotson go tonight. Bunch of comments in here talking about Dotson, talking about questioning if Dotson or Horvath makes the team. One of the guys to look for today is going to be Elijah. I was at Jihad Dotson. Elijah Dotson. Can he pick up where he left off? Preseason game number 1. Gentlemen, the question then goes to you guys to start this thing off. Do we keep, asked Jeff Gray, do we keep Dotson over Horvath if he shows out the last 2 preseason games? Let's just change this. Instead of we, do the Chargers. Will the Chargers keep Dotson, comma, and if it's between him and Horvath, who do they take?
I'll go. Want me to go first? Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, it's all right. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead. I would say, and we got 2 games still, and luckily I like now that they changed it to where it's just like the massive cut day at the end instead of like going slowly, because you can really evaluate more. As it sits right now, as electric as Elijah Dotson looked, to me, the only way they keep him is if they're cutting Joshua Kelly or Isaiah Spiller, which I don't think it's either of those is happening. I just think Horvath gives you some other element to this offense that they wouldn't have without him. Now, if they decide they don't need that element, then Dotson's a nice little speed piece. But with the depth they have, it'd be hard for me to see. But that could change. Just as it stands right now, that's what I would say.
Jake Hefner. Elijah Dotson. Is he on the 53?
It's tough to predict that right now. Is he on the bubble? Yes. Do you put him as the potential ones to put on the roster over any other position group? Yeah, you'd probably say he's at the top part of that list. But as Ryan said, it's just like, obviously you have Ekeler, you're going to have Kelly, you're going to have Spiller. Obviously, Elijah Dotson did enough in the first preseason game that he took over the spot of Larry Roundtree.
Yeah.
Trying to pick between Horvath and Dotson, I don't know if that's the particular right way to go. I know that Horvath hasn't done a lot in terms of the preseason goes. I know what we saw from him early last year, and I would like to see him utilized more like that again in this offense. But I'm not so sure that it's going to come back at the fullback expense if they ultimately keep him on the 53-man roster. And it's going to be tough, because if Elijah Dotson continues doing what he's doing, it's going to be extremely risky to even think about putting him on the practice squad, to think if he's even going to escape that waiver period. Yeah. So I'm not so sure that the Chargers could find themselves between a rock and a hard place when it comes to the end of this preseason.
Yeah, I think Chargers fans need to brace themselves, because if you look at the roster in totality, right, he would essentially be the 4th running back, and maybe he jumps up one of those other guys. Who knows? But what would you rather this team keep? A 4th running back, or possibly like the 6th receiver, or possibly like additional safety depth, maybe edge depth? Like as good as it would be to have Elijah Dotson in there, like think about realistically how many carries, how many plays you'd actually be in to impact the game, especially with the weapons on offense. Like you can go 10 deep before we even mention his name on the weapons on this team versus safety depth. We don't know what's going on with JT Woods. We don't know if he's going to be ready to go. We don't know Alohi Gilman. We don't know. There's a lot of questions there. Secondary, we don't know what's going to go on with JC Jackson. Interior defensive line, we don't know what's going to go on with Tito. Like, there's a bunch of question marks there. Running backs, to me, seems like the least questionable. So when you look at roster construction, that's why I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, I mean, if Dotson or excuse me, if Kelly or Spiller was not on this team, this would be an easy decision to make. But like you said, Dan, are you going to sacrifice a sixth or a fifth position at other really big positions of need for a running back for? And trust me, I love what I saw from Elijah Dotson. That was a fantastic performance by him. I just don't know if you could sacrifice other positions where you really need key pieces of depth for an RB4. I just don't know.
I agree. All right, guys, we are flooded with comments. So I'm going to do this. We're going to take a quick 45-second break while we talk about our friends over at Mint Mobile, where you can get $15 a month for wireless, unlimited cell phone coverage. While we're doing that, I'm going to blaze through all of these comments. Everybody can kind of see their comments in here, and then we'll start off with some of the topics on the other side of this as we talk all things Chargers training camp, preseason, number 2 as well. We'll be back in just a few minutes.
If you've ever thought, why in the world is my wireless bill so damn high? Then let me tell you about our friends over at Mint Mobile who we're partnering with for today's video. Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for as low as $15 a month, and you don't have to sacrifice any coverage, speed, or data. They're built on the nation's largest 5G network, so they keep costs low by selling directly to you online. They cut out the retail stores and the salespeople. All Mint Mobile plans include unlimited nationwide talk and text, plus lightning-fast 5G and free mobile hotspot. So why should you have to pay for more than you have to access the same network? It only takes 15 minutes to switch, and you'll be paying as low as $15 a month for your phone plan. It really is that simple. So use the link in the description below. Try mintmobile.com/Chargers Unleashed to get started. Click the link in the description below or scan the QR code.
All right, we're back. We just flew through some of these comments. Jake or Ryan, any of them that stood out to you that you'd like to pick up on for a discussion point?
I saw one about Saints media talking about how they dominated Chargers. It's funny because I was on a Saints radio station back on, what was it, Friday? And they brought that up. It's like, oh, everything we're hearing from our media guys is that the Saints looked great. They obviously said it very respectfully, but they're like, what did you see? Like what from your angle? So, I think the Saints do look improved than they did last year. They're kind of a dark horse to make the playoffs in the NFC, I think, mainly just because the NFC is so weak. But I definitely didn't see anything concerning, and you were there, I know, Dan, and anything concerning from the Chargers side. So I saw that comment. I thought that was funny because I actually heard that from like a radio station ask me that same question.
Yes. Jake and we talked about it after the first day of the joint practice, and then it continued on to day 2. So I don't really think anything changed. We weren't going to try to sugarcoat things. Both teams looked good and looked bad at times, depending on what you're focusing on. I would say for the Chargers specifically, their rushing offense looked good. Their defense in totality looked very good. I think their interior rush, their edge rush, their defensive line in general was balling. I think you saw secondary JC Jackson looked pretty good. He dropped the easy interception. On offense, again, whether this is bad offense, good defense, probably more the latter. Saints defense held the Chargers offense in check for the most part. Other than Chargers pass protection looked great. Chargers rushing protection and run blocking looked fantastic, and the running game looked good. I'm not concerned about the offensive, in terms of passing plays. They'll be fine. They're going up against a pretty darn good Saints defense as well. But the things that I think the Chargers fans are most concerned about, defense, running game, those are the 2 things that I saw that looked good. But for people saying the Saints dominated the Chargers, like, it's just not true. Like, whatever they say that the Saints did, the Chargers can say the exact same thing. So depending on what you're going to kind of pick up on, like if you want to take quick little cherry picking things, that's fine. Whatever. Jake, thoughts?
I guess we'll see for real in 3 hours.
Yeah. I mean, Dan's completely right on this. We didn't sugarcoat it at all. We didn't have any problems talking about where the Chargers lost out there in joint practice. I thought it was a competitive practice from what it sounded like. You follow some of the Saints beat, and then obviously from what's taking place with the Chargers insiders, it seemed like a fairly competitive, even flow of practice. Both teams are going to win in certain areas. Both teams are going to lose in certain areas. So yeah, this whole narrative, I didn't really get where that was coming from. Like, yeah, your wide receivers are going to beat some of our DBs sometimes. I get it. Ours are going to do the same thing to you. And so you evaluate it that way rather than kind of putting the blinders on. Yes, it's nice to see certain highlights, namely a Keenan Allen one-handed catch, but literally we had someone that came to us criticizing it because Keenan Allen was going up against their CB3 and the fact that it wasn't Marshawn Lattimore, that a diving one-handed catch isn't something to gleam about. So hell, I would argue a lot of passes then, if that's the case, aren't really that much to gleam about if they're not against your number one corner. So why are we making a big deal about it? I don't know. It was a great play nonetheless. That's all we were lauding on this show. So depending on what your perception is, again, my final takeaway, it was competitive on both sides. Both teams won in certain areas. And like you said, Ryan, we'll know more about it in the next 3 hours.
Yes, I do want to kind of, I don't want to say put to bed, but there's like a flood of comments and conversation about kind of the Isaiah Spiller, Joshua Kelly versus Elijah Dotson conversation and which one to keep. First off, Elijah Dotson has played very little. And yes, he's splashed, but it's very easy to have a flash in the pan play. Like if you can do it consistently, then you're talking. Number two, Isaiah Spiller was the best running back in that game last week, in my opinion. Like go back and look at what Isaiah Spiller had to do with what he was given versus what Elijah Dotson had to do with. Elijah Dotson had holes the size of like the Titanic. Like all he had to do was go left and run fast, and he was good.
And now, Isaiah Spiller just had a hold, which negated a 70-yard touchdown.
and honestly, that was breaking regardless, if we're being honest. So
yeah,
look, Elijah Dotson is exciting, but as much as Elijah Dotson is exciting to me, Isaiah Spiller fits this run style perfectly. And I think you started to see glimpses of that last week. So let's just wait and see before we start getting on the, Kelly or Spiller and everybody should be gone. Brad asks, is our offensive line elite now? Jake, one word, yes or no?
No, but that doesn't mean that I'm trying to poo-poo it. Okay, let's remember, this is a new combination of 5 guys, 2 different players in 2 different spots in Jamari Sawyer and Zion Johnson, moving them in different spots. Obviously, for what they were able to do in limited snaps last week, obviously the offensive line did well. 216 yards that they were able to plow the line for rushing last week. It was a great sight to see, especially when you're talking about the implementations of what Kellen Moore wanted for this offense. Now, I would want to see some improvement from Jamari Sawyer. While he wasn't terrible in terms of the overall offensive lineman, he probably had one of the worst overall grades in terms of run blocking and pass blocking last week. So I definitely want to see some improvement from him. Mm-hmm. Does it have the potential to be one of the better offensive lines in the league? 100%. Again, I have said in terms of when you put Zion Johnson in between Rashawn Slater and a guy like Corey Linsley, that is going to improve his play. When you have Jamari Sawyer with Corey Linsley to his left and Trey Pipkins to his right, as big of a body as he is, that's going to generate some good things for your run blocking, your pass blocking. Remember, this is still a different 5 combination than it was last year. It always takes time for offensive linemen to gel together as a unit. So is it going to look better? Yes, I have the expectation it's going to look a lot better. Is it going to be elite? Let's pump the brakes on that.
For folks in the comments, give us your topics, questions, thoughts, and we'll go ahead and put them up as well. It's virtual tailgate season, so let us know what you're drinking in the comments. Jake, you got a drink of choice? Ryan's got hot toddy. Jake?
Oh, I'm sorry, you're asking me. Jake, I thought you were still thinking about
do you have a drink of choice?
He looked frozen.
It's always bourbon, my friend. It's always bourbon.
Good. Question comes in from Robert S. Can you see Quentin Johnston winning the wide receiver spot between him and Palmer later on down the line this season? Ryan, what say you?
Yeah, you could see it. I wouldn't be concerned either way if you want to call them wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 4. Like they're both going to get plenty of reps and they're both going to get plenty of shine in this offense. So Yeah, if you want to look at a depth chart and see the 3 next to his name instead of the 4, I could see it, but I don't think it matters either way. They're both gonna, I think, be very involved. They both do different things very well. But yeah, I could definitely see him officially getting that title if we're worried about that.
Jake has said many times, it literally does not matter in a Kellen Moore offense. It's going to get spread around.
Just listen to what he said. Just listen to what he said when he was asked that question about the wide receiver 3 position. He says, we have 4 starting caliber wide receivers. So who cares? Honestly, who cares? They're going to be featured, every single one of them, a lot in this offense.
They should just put like in the depth chart, like 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D.
Here's a better question then that we just to like answer the question fairly. Who finishes the year with better stats, Quentin Johnston or Joshua Palmer?
Okay, I had this conversation with the director yesterday, and it was loosely about this. That is so hard. If I had to put money on it, I think it's going to be, I think Quentin Johnston will have more yards. I think Josh Palmer will have more receptions.
All right,
touchdowns, I think, go to Quentin Johnston as well.
How about take this line, Dan? So Josh Palmer last year, 72 receptions, 769 yards, and 3 touchdowns.
Under.
Well, not for him. Does Quentin Johnston eclipse that? If you just put a line for him, does he eclipse those numbers?
That's a damn good season for him if he eclipses those numbers as a rookie as wide receiver 3 or 4, because Josh Palmer did that mainly being wide receiver 1 for many weeks. So no, I don't think so. Ryan?
It's close. It's close. I think Palmer eclipsed that personally. I think Palmer has a phenomenal year this year, but I love Josh Palmer. So I love his route running. I love everything. So I think we'll see him used differently than we've seen in his first 2 years of his career. But it wouldn't shock me. Like, obviously I knew you need to mathematically like add these up correctly, so you're not giving Justin Herbert 10,000 yards passing. But it wouldn't shock me if, Mike Williams and Keenan Allen are both over, 11, 1,200, and then Palmer and QJ are both in that 700 to 900 range. That wouldn't shock me.
Damn, Ryan's going off. Big Buddha's drinking Hennessy and raspberry simply lemonade. On the other side of the spectrum, Jeff Gray's drinking coffee and water because he's at work. I'm putting coffee and water in quotes. Come on, Jeff. You don't got to lie to us. Hot take or fake take? Dan and the director together for a fun show yesterday. Yes. Shout out to the director. Tons of fun.
That was a great show.
Thank you. We talked about this. Athir also said he's smoking cigars and coffee. Attaboy.
Sounds like what Hollywood used to do at like the movie studios. You want bacon on your cigarettes? Of course I do.
Bolton doing shots of Jägermeister tonight.
Oof. I didn't even know they made Jaeger still.
You have a better stomach than I do. That's for sure.
Joseph's doing Modelo Michelada time, which that sounds fantastic.
Yeah, we got Joseph. We got Pozole on the stove right now, so definitely gonna have some Modelo and Michelada later.
Why you got to talk about that right now?
Wife's got 2 big pots. I had to go to the store to get some pork, and yeah, we'll be eating good here soon. It's perfect Pozole weather.
Okay, one thing I do want Chargers fans to remember. And I asked the question recently of, do you think the Chargers could have 3,000-yard receivers? And like immediately, first thought is like, oh yeah, totally. We totally could. But then I want to throw these names out. And you tell me how this is going to happen. Okay. Offensive weapons, we talked about at the top. Obviously, Mike Dubb, Slayer, Josh Palmer, that's 3. Then you got Quentin Johnston, that's 4. Then you've got Gerald Everett, that's 5. You got Donald Parham, that's 6. Austin Ekeler, that's 7. Let's just use any of the running backs, 2. So that's 8. Then maybe Darius Davis or John Hightower or Jalen Guyton, that's 9. That's 9 guys. That's 9 weapons that are going to be receiving catches from Justin Herbert. It is awfully tough to have 3 1,000-yard receivers when you have that many weapons and you go that deep. It's one thing if you have like 3 good dudes and then the rest suck, right? Like if we're talking about like the Miami Heat of old or Lakers where they just go crazy high top end and then just the rest is minimum wage guys. That's just not the case. And so I hope to see spread the wealth. I want to see like rising tide lifts all boats. But a 3K in 3 receivers, that's hard to do when you have this much talent on one team. So, Jake Hefner, player who needs to step up the most this preseason game. Or I should say, player who has the most to prove this preseason game.
I think low-hanging fruit, you would probably expect that Quentin Johnston would want to have a better game than what he had in week 1. Yes, it was very nice to see him go back into the game in that second quarter in that 2-minute drive and ultimately score the touchdown. I thought that was a good thing for him in terms of moving forward and his confidence, given what had happened in the prior quarter with those drops. And some of them weren't all his fault. One of them was a great defensive play from the Rams secondary for the deep pass that was thrown. But yes, he needs to obviously get the drops out of his system. He is a rookie. Let's all remember that. But I think that internally, he knows that he would want to have a better game than what he performed at in week 1. So yeah, easy one right off the top. It would have to be Quentin Johnston.
Lee, shout out to Bruin. Game day here. Wish they moved it forward. 12 a.m. start time here in Ireland. Shout out across the pond. Sipping a Jameson. Attaboy.
My friend.
Athir asked a question for Ryan. Will Stick play 3 quarters tonight? And how much will Quentin Johnston play? What are you expecting?
Good question. I mean, I have no sources on this, but my opinion, I can't see Stick playing that much. I think he proved enough last week. He's been on the team for whatever it's been, 4 years now. I think Duggan's the one that has more to prove if he can battle for that QB2 spot, or if he's going to be a practice squad guy, or if they're going to carry 3 QBs again, which I know Chargers fans will be ecstatic to hear that 3 QBs on the roster again on game day. So I wouldn't see Stick playing more than a half. But I mean, it was fun to watch him, so I'd love to. And QJ, what was the question about QJ? Will he play more, or how much will he play?
I think the question was, how much will he play tonight?
Gotcha. I'd say a half still. I think a full half. I think, like Jake mentioned, and we talked about it, Dan, I was very pleased that they put him back out there, because I said, Jake, you weren't on, but when I was talking to Dan, like when you play receiver, like I played in high school, not very well, but I did play in receiver. You get a couple drops, you start getting the yips. Like it can be a bad trend. I mean, just look at Jerry Jeudy's career up until now. Like, guy had
That's a good point.
Phenomenal hands, and all of a sudden 3 years in, he's qualified as a guy that can't catch the football. So when you start having drops, you need to stamp that out quickly. So I was super pleased they put him back in. He gets the touchdown, and hopefully that's it and beyond him. Because if we start seeing some more drops in this game, then it's like, okay, this is a theme now we need to really tackle and get rid of. So I think he plays a whole half just to truly get, confidence and feeling like what he does in practice translates over to the games, and he's truly vying for that pseudo wide receiver 3 spot. So I think we see both Stick and QJ play one half.
Jake's going to be taking the reins here for a second, some questions answered, but Ryan, let's flip it over to you real quick. Player who has the most to prove today.
I mean, another probably low-hanging fruit, but I'll go JT Woods just because I think there's so much to prove at that back end at safety depth. And, obviously Derwin and Alohi's going to be your starter, but we know Brandon Staley, I say it all the time, like he doesn't call corners and safeties as DBs because they play all over the place. And if JT wins, wants to get on the field, he's going to have to prove he can play kind of in all over, but also if there's, God forbid, an injury, like he's basically the next man up at this point. So I think he's definitely got a lot to prove. And like I said, I think he did improve as the game went on last week. But he'll go against better competition tonight, probably getting that early start. So love to see JT Woods. I love that draft pick. And if he can get his, tackling shirt up, if he can get his pursuit angles better and not have any, bonehead penalties that give you 1st and goal from the 1, then I'll be happy with his performance.
And he looked good in joint practice as well, by the way.
Yes, which is great.
Dan, normally we would save a question for like this towards the end of the episode, but I want to make sure that I don't lose it here. Who do you see having the best individual performance on the offense and defense for tonight's game versus the Saints? Dan, I know you love making predictions. I hate making them. So by all means, this is why this question now belongs to you.
Dang, that's a good question. I think this is going to be a Hightower season. I think you're going to see Hightower ball out today. You didn't get to see him last preseason game. I think you're going to see Hightower catch something crazy today. I've been on record. I think he makes the 53-man roster with the unknown of Jalen Guyton. I think John Hightower goes on defense. Oof. I think you're going to see Daiyan Henley do something crazy. I think we're going to see a forced fumble, big hit, maybe interception and coverage, but I think Daiyan Henley's going to flash today. Those are my 2 guys.
Brian, how about yourself?
For offense, oh man, that was Hightower's kind of my pick too. So Let's go offensive line. I think, it's hard to truly, I guess, other than just looking at PFF grades, but I think Jordan McFadden has a better game. I think he showed some good stuff last week, but would love to see some improvement there as the Chargers you guys were talking about. Are they elite or not? I think it's a very good 5. What do you constitute elite? Is it top 2, top 3, top 5? I think they're in the top 10 for sure. But the depth is where we want to see like continued improvement, which I think they've got some good pieces there. And so I'd love to see McFadden. So I think he has a solid game. And on defense, there's a lot of good storylines. I think, Scott Matlock, I love to see. I want to see Gerard Clark a little more involved, but I'll go with my guy, Tuipulotu, who I think had a good game last week, but I think he just continues to ball out. And, if you're a Chargers fan, a lot of you are USC fans also, but if you're not, you're going to become one because of how great this kid is. And so I just want him to keep showing out and getting this fan base behind him because I love Tuipulotu. So he's going to ball out.
It took nearly a half hour for Tuipulotu's name to get mentioned on this show. And what's interesting is that normally that would be my selection, Ryan, but that he's only going to be playing a handful of snaps. So in the greater picture of things, Daiyan Henley is going to be playing more snaps than Tuli, in my opinion. John Hightower is going to be playing more snaps than Tuli in this circumstance. So I really like that pick. And for him to show out the way that he did in the limited amount of snaps that he did in week 1, I thought was very impressive. I'd also like to see Chris Rump continue to do what he has done the past couple preseasons. Last preseason, he also looked great. Unfortunately, couldn't put it together in the regular season. Now he's kind of gotten back to that. And you've even heard Coach Staley laud his work ethic. And when we had him on this show, he obviously said that he was not happy with his performance in the regular season last year. So it's good to see that, the preseason once again is treating Chris Rump right. You just got to want to see things string together and ultimately into the regular season.
Yep.
Joseph comes in with a question. Another punt return for Darius Davis today, or maybe a kick return?
If I'm the Chargers, I'm not even having him catch punts and kicks anymore. Just maybe Elijah Dotson. Maybe that's how he can make his impact felt, is give him some reps there. But we know what we got in Darius Davis. He's good. He's our kick returner.
That's a good point, actually.
I would even put him back there.
That's a good point. Does he have anything to prove now? Like, he literally just walk, jog, swag all the way to the end zone.
Maybe you find some different ways to get him infused in this offense. I mean, I know that he caught a couple passes last week, but now let's try some different things with him. Who knows? But I'm with Ryan. You really don't have anything to prove with him. Dan, I called you literally right as halftime had been called in the preseason game. You weren't even home because you couldn't watch the game at that point in time. You had it recorded. And then your reaction to when I told you that Darius Davis had ran back a touchdown, you're like, wait, in the first game, he ran back a touchdown? Yeah. Yeah. So no, he doesn't have anything to prove. He is your starting returner. I would like to see them get a little bit more creative in how they want to infuse him into this offense.
Jeff Gray comes in with a comment. Backup tight ends have some proving to do. Recently, you heard Gerald Everett on the show with Matt Money Smith and Chris Harry. For folks who have not listened to that one, very good episode, refreshingly honest in my opinion. But the backup guys, you talk about guys like Trey McKitty, Donald Parham Jr., Stone Smart, possibly. They do have some proving to do. I would agree with that. I think the one who's probably on the hot seat the most, you guys tell me if you agree or disagree, but I think Trey McKitty's seat is hot right now.
100%.
Stone Smart has flashed a bit. He made a great play in a joint practice, torching, I think, I want to say it's a free agent signing of the safety, Marcus Mays, I think. I forget exactly who it was, but that wasn't Marcus Mays. But anyways, Stone Smart, I think, could take that job. Agree, disagree?
Yeah. I'll jump in first, I guess. I mean, he's looked good. The other guy I want to see Michael Ezeki too. Get some more reps and shine. He was a guy that when he signed as an undrafted free agent, I predicted potentially making the 53. Now it's very uphill battle for him, but yes, I would agree that Trey McKitty's seat is definitely hot. But yeah, go ahead, Jake.
Is it hot enough to where he could be part of the roster cuts?
Yeah,
before the regular season. Okay,
I think so.
Which I agree with. I personally think something that this tight end room is still lacking is a legitimate blocking tight end. As of right now, Donald Parham is your best in that category. Trey McKitty, who you essentially drafted for when it came to blocking, what he was known for in college, just unfortunately hasn't been able to produce that. So if the opportunity arises to where some other team releases a blocking tight end that you feel could ultimately help your squad out, that might be the name that I would choose to go get one for.
Yeah. Let's talk about the interior guys. We haven't talked about the interior defensive line much today. Excited. Scott Matlock has come up a few times in the comments here. Okoye flashed a little bit this last preseason game. What do you guys make of this interior defensive line? Have you seen enough to say, again, I know it's just preseason, it's only training camp, but does it look different this year to you guys than it did last year at this time?
I think the Chargers have found something with their depth pieces. And Dan, we've talked about this for months. The competition for who's going to win those final spots on the 53-man roster with interior defensive line, it's just going to be brutal. It's going to be brutal to have to cut that group down, because I think you're seeing a lot more out of the depth of this defensive line. So it was great, obviously, getting the news of Austin Johnson coming back. You have Sebastian Joseph Day back in practice. You know what you're getting from Morgan Fox, who just continues, seems like just a daily occurrence that he is creating pressure and making sacks in practice. You drafted Scott Matlock. You brought in Nick Williams through free agency. Gerard Clark, who is a favorite of mine and I know a favorite of many others, as an undrafted free agent. That's about the spot where the logjam starts to get really tough, because how many interior defensive linemen do you ultimately keep on this team? So I thought it was a great showing from the interior defensive lineman in the first preseason game. Now, can you continue that? Yes. If it does continue, it's going to make the decisions for the coaching staff a hell of a lot harder when it comes to final cut down day. So yes, I've been impressed early. Let's see if it can continue.
Ryan?
Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like I don't need to add too much. Jake hit every kind of point, but the depth is impressive. I think this was what Staley's coming into last year. That was like the biggest point of like emphasis was obviously the run game was horrible. The run defense was horrible. The interior was, I hate calling guys soft because I mean, these are NFL players, but it was definitely a point of not a lot of success in stopping the run. And they went drastically in free agency and improved that. And in the draft, with guys like Tito and others, and obviously the acquisition of Johnston and Sebastian Joseph Day. So, and then I think coming into this year, they just build upon that. So I think I've been really impressed with, they found kind of some nice building blocks last year. Unfortunately, they were hit with the injury bug, but then they kind of built upon that and just kept stacking bricks. And now, as Jake mentioned, I mean, you have potentially 5, 6, 7 guys that can absolutely play in a rotation. And at the end of the day, how many guys are you going to keep? And from nose tackle to an interior kind of 3-tech to 5-tech position, like how many guys do you keep? And this is where it goes back to the very beginning of our conversation. Like you look at a guy like Elijah Dotson, like you want to keep him and not keep your 6th defensive interior guy when we saw what the injuries stacked up and the rotation that you need for the defense that Staley calls. So I'm very pleased with it. And I think we see a lot of these guys make it just because of how important it is and how we've seen the injuries stack up in years past.
Leandre says, you guys should collab with my baby Bolt Bro YouTuber, Michael McLean. Young dude brings the Charge content like a few others do. I hope that was okay to shout him out. Of course, that's okay to shout him out.
We know Mikey Mack.
We know Mikey Mack for sure. Would love to collaborate with him. Huge friend, fan of the show. Say hi to him if you talk to him. Question from Joseph. Any notable starters playing today? I know Staley usually doesn't, but just want to see. Again, keyword there is starters. Any notable starters playing today? Let's talk first. Line on both sides. Offensive line, defensive line.
I feel like Zion and Salyer probably play again, yeah?
I agree with that.
You guys agree that?
Yeah, I would think. Do you consider Morgan Fox a starter?
I do.
He's playing like one.
Yeah,
that's pretty
playing like one. Damn.
Yep. Any other linemen? I don't think you're going to see either left tackle, right tackle. You're not going to see Linsley.
Yeah. No.
You're not going to see Bosa. You're not going to see Mack. You're not going to. Yeah. Linebackers.
Would you put in Palmer, Dan?
Yeah, probably.
You would put in Palmer.
You would, or you think the Chargers will?
Oh, good question. No, actually, no. I'll take it back. I wouldn't. I don't think Palmer really has anything to prove. I think we know what we got in Palmer as a stud. So, no, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
Secondary, I think the only one probably I guess you want to consider Jazir Taylor a starter, but I don't know what fringe starter.
How about Kenneth Murray?
No, he's not playing. He didn't play week 1 either. Neither Eric Kendricks.
And the only reason, and I like this question because I know some teams have been kind of taking this what the third preseason game used to be when we had 4. And they would say like, okay, this is the game that we want to get our starters some of the most practice snaps before the final preseason game to evaluate all of the, depth pieces before we jump into the regular season. So I actually like this question because I think this is something that a lot of people forget. So there might be a better chance that you get them to play this week as opposed to next week, if anything happens. But I'm still with you, Dan. Joshua Palmer doesn't have anything to prove. I wouldn't put him out there.
Yeah. I had this, it's funny. I had this conversation yesterday when watching the Rams game. And, it's funny because Sean McVay is kind of the one that started this trend of not playing any starters. And then a lot of the league adapted it. And now you're seeing the league kind of revert back to, like you mentioned, Dan, or you mentioned Jake, like at least one game seeing the starters. And I think the key for me, and everyone can have their own opinion, but for me, I only want to see starters when there's a lack of continuity in a unit and guys just need reps together. So for instance, like if your offensive line has never played together, like the Rams, like you should play a bulk of your starters to at least get that flow together in a few snaps. But a single receiver, like don't need to see it. Don't need to see Josh Palmer. Like his continuity is not going to matter. He already has the chemistry with Justin Herbert. If he knows the offense, great. But it's more of like those continuity positions, the guys you play alongside with, because so much in this game, continuity and consistency matter. And I mean, we saw that last year, right? When Derwin James went out, all of a sudden the secondary got better because it's like they realized they couldn't just rely on the star power of Derwin James. They had to play as a unit. And so that's the only thing I like seeing in preseason is guys that need to learn how to play together as a collective unit. Then I want to see them play. If it's just individual stars, like they're good. Like we don't need to worry about Josh Palmer or QJ. I want to see just because he's a rookie. Like the guy just needs some reps because he's, needs to get out there and stuff. So anyway, that was just my little soapbox I'll get on.
We are live on Charges Unleashed. In the comments, give us your questions, thoughts, topics you'd like us to cover. We're going to talk about our friends over at Aura, partners of the show. They do identity theft prevention. You can get rid of all of the spam, all of the robocalls that keep calling you and annoying you. They can protect your identity from getting stolen or hacked or your money being taken from you. We'll be back in 50 seconds after our friends over at Aura give a message by the one and only Jake Hefner. But again, give us your thoughts, comments, questions. We'll talk about it on the other side.
Have you ever Googled yourself and were shocked to see your personal information exposed on one of those public listing sites? Data brokers are making a fortune selling your information to robocallers, spammers, and others who want to learn more about you, like where you live.
We've been trying to reach you concerning your car's extended warranty.
That's why I'm excited to tell you about today's sponsor, Aura. Aura can identify data brokers exposing your info and submit opt-out requests on your behalf. And brokers everywhere are legally required to remove your info if you ask them to, but they make it super hard to do. So let Aura handle that for you. You can try Aura for up to 2 weeks using this link that we're going to put up here on the screen. Aura also does so much more to protect you and your family from online threats that you cannot see. So make sure to check out aura.com/Chargers Unleashed to get a 14-day free trial and see if your personal information has been leaked online.
All right. Lots of questions around special teams coming in here. Brad, to kick this thing off, Brad Spicoli asks, how is special teams looking? Jake, I'll kick this one to you.
Pretty damn good. You go back and you listen to Ryan Ficken's press conference at the podium just a couple weeks ago. What he has done just in individual drills that you see practice starting off with, I think he has completely just changed the culture around that unit. And you could see how much it improved last year and his message that he is basically sending to all of the key players about what this year means. Last year was last year, but how do we take what the best parts were of last year and how do we build upon that? And you can obviously see that with the emphasis of how important special teams is for the Chargers, with them going out and drafting a guy like Darius Davis and them knowing how much they need a weapon on special teams to win that third facet of the game. So I still think from what Ryan Fitkin has been doing, you've seen it in practice with the emphasis on the individual drills, with the team drills. It's looking better and better every time we see it. I'm just floored for what Ryan Fitkin has been able to do in such a short period of time.
Ryan, you gave the thumbs up. Do you agree?
Oh, yeah. I mean, when was the last time we've had zero concerns about the special teams? I mean, we don't even need to talk about it. It's just like, they're good. You got 9-inch Dicker out there seizing the day and, just all this juice from the back end. You got Horvath out there. So, yeah. I mean, the special teams is great. So I saw a comment out there about Dustin Hopkins, but yeah, this is Dicker's team. So we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, assuming they let Hopkins go and Dicker is our kicker, who is the backup if Dicker gets hurt? Would it be J.K. Scott?
Didn't they have, I thought at one point, didn't they have that question and show that J.K. Scott was essentially the emergency kicker in a situation like that?
I don't remember.
Because I thought it was right. I thought it was at the time when Hopkins had gotten hurt last year and they were posing that question, but then he came out and he still made those field goals even when he got hurt. I think that's when they were posing it. So in this circumstance, it probably would be J.K. Scott.
Steve Doyle asked, do you think other teams will pick up our players on practice because of our depth at the roster?
Sure.
I'll answer this one. Yeah. I think there's probably a handful of guys that other teams could be eyeing. Look at the depth of the interior defensive line. Number one, I would say secondary. Number two, and then probably Elijah Dotson. And wide receiver. Staley's been on record saying multiple times this is the deepest wide receiver group that he's had since being on the team. And I would agree with that. How did you pronounce this name, Jake? Was it Lee Shah? I think it was something different than I thought. But
I wouldn't have pronounced it that way. But now that you say that, now I recognize
I said it, but I said Laus de. I think it was Laus de. Oh, maybe that's what it was. Laus de Bruin. That's maybe what it is. Daiyan should get more snaps with Neiman being injured. I think you will see a lot of Daiyan Henley today, and you'll see him both on special teams and on defense. And he's looked very good on special teams, by the way. Kyle comes in and says, New Orleans seems like they will do a drive or two of almost all starters. I remember Phillip Rivers would do a drive, score a touchdown in 2 minutes, and then leave. That sounds nice. Robert asks, what are the chances the Chargers have a better record in season than anticipated?
Well, it depends on which ranking you're reading. Is it Adam Ranks?
Like
is it
Super Bowl?
Is it Adam Ranks? Record prediction for the Chargers?
What was that, by the way?
I think the same. No, I thought it was. Some people have had the Chargers at a worse record, like 7-9,
like 10-7.
I've read one where it's 7-9. So I'm not sure how we're all of a sudden going to be regressing that much.
7-10.
But yeah, it depends on what record prediction you're reading. So in terms of the overarching media of the NFL, I think they just want to see the Chargers win a playoff game. Dan and I had this conversation a couple weeks ago. I think it needs to be more than that, where you need to win more than just one playoff game, because literally you had it right here in your fingertips and you allowed the debacle that happened with the Jacksonville playoff game. So to me, you got to go further than just winning a playoff game.
Capil says, any chance you guys turn into storm chasers? Not going to lie. When I first saw this, I read stormtroopers in my head and I was like, I don't get the reference. And then I was like, oh, storm chasers. I was honestly, up until about an hour ago, Jake could attest to this, I wasn't sure if I was going or not to the game. And then I was like, you know what? I've got kids. I've got a family. I've got mothers and mothers-in-laws who are going to freak out if I leave the house. So I'm going to stay home, not chasing storms today. Anyone who's going to the game, please be careful, be safe. We'll see. I don't know how bad this is actually going to get, but you never know. There's some crazy drivers there in LA. Brad says Davis is going to be a problem for this league. I agree. I think you are just scratching the surface with how much this kid is going to impact this team. We know what he's going to do on special teams. Inject that speed into the offense along with Quentin Johnston, along with Jalen Geithner Hightower. Like, whew, not bad. Eddie says no hurricane will stop our bolts. Kyle, question. I think we need to pick up a safety as soon as we can.
Can I just add on that real quick? I know it's beating a dead horse, but just seeing what the Rams paid John Johnson, it's like, oh,
stop
man.
it.
Oh, man.
Too soon. But John Johnson's starting for that team. Is that a question?
I don't think so, no. Jordan Fuller and John Johnson will be those two back there.
John Johnson, at best, I think, would be safety 3 on this team.
You don't think he'd beat out Alohi?
No, I don't. I think this team has way too much trust in Alohi.
Obviously, I think
I would love to have John Johnson. I'm not saying I don't want him. I'm just saying John Johnson wants to play.
Well, and that must be what the Chargers are thinking, because if you don't not sign John Johnson for that kind of money if he's going to be your start. Like, I'm saying that very horribly. If they view him as a backup, then that's why they didn't sign him. So yes, you're probably correct in that. I think he could potentially beat out Alohi, but obviously it doesn't matter now. He's a Ram. So,
Jake, my intuition was strong. It is Lee Shaw. I remember this because I got butchered all the time when I messed up his name last time. Leandre, give it love. And I love you guys. Next question. If Derek Carr does play today, I would love to see Chris Rumph and Tuli each record a sack.
That'd be nice.
That'd be nice. Bruh, says Brad. Sacks for everybody on the defensive line. Athir predicts 14-3 Chargers. Stay ready, says Go Bolts. Original one. Be safe, Bolt fam. Any questions on here that you guys want to get to? Or any topics that we've got to cover so far today? Keys to the game? Have we talked about that yet? What are the things you're looking for?
I haven't talked about keys to the game, but I know some of the things we obviously where we led the show off with, things that we would like to see continue. You'd like to see the continuation of the Chargers offensive line and that run blocking that we saw in week 1. You obviously are excited to see a little bit of a redemption game for Quentin Johnston. Obviously, John Hightower finally being able to play in a preseason game. JT Woods is going to be a spotlight, as Ryan talked about, in terms of getting a lot of snaps just because of the nursing injuries to Alohi Gilman and Mark Webb. So he's going to see a lot of playing time. Outside of that, you'd probably just pick individual players that you would want to see. Yeah, you'd like to see ultimately a similar score to what the Chargers got last week against the Rams. I wouldn't go that far, because I would consider New Orleans to be a little bit better of a team. This would be a little bit better of a test for them to go against, especially if Derek Carr ends up starting. So if it does go that way, I think it's a great test for this defense, considering that you probably won't be seeing a lot of the starters playing.
Ryan, what say you?
Yeah, I think one player I'm excited to see is Keelan Doss. I've always liked Keelan Doss. I know he's kind of bounced around, been practice squad guy, but had a nice 28-yard catch last week that I think was real nice from, was it from Duggan or Stick? I can't remember now, but
Stick.
Yeah, Stick. Yeah. So, seeing him out there more, I think will be fun. I mentioned Michael Ezike. I'd love to see him if he's able to get more involved. They have a lot of players at tight end. I don't know if they have like good depth necessarily, or they have decent depth, but I just mean like if 1 through 6 or whatever is considered good or not. But I'd love to see Ezike out there more. And then just defensively, just continuing kind of what we've seen towards the end of last season into this first preseason game, where I think we've seen a lot of improvement, guys flying to the football. Dan, you've mentioned Dan Henley a lot. Love to see him out there more, and just see what these guys can really do in terms of, stopping the run, solidifying the pass. And if they're able to continue, stacking on that, I think that'll be good. So, but Keelan Doss, probably who I'm most looking forward to.
A lot of questions have come in about Landon Collins, by the way. Do you guys see any chance of the Chargers going after him? I mean, generally speaking, pretty darn good tackler, pretty darn good in providing pressure, at least according to PFF. Run defense, I would say above average. Seems like he would be more of a Derwin type of safety depth than it would be a Lohi type. But thoughts on Landon Collins?
Dan, I will say the same argument that I said against the John Johnston piece, because when we all heard months ago, what it feels like now, when the Chargers were interested potentially in John Johnston to sign, and then it was crickets, and then OTAs came, minicamp came, training camp started. And at that point in time, if they were truly interested in John Johnston, they would have signed him. So that clearly spoke to you how confident they were in Alohi. Now, we'll see if this little injury scare makes them change their minds by the time that the regular season starts. But I feel like this is another one that if they were interested, or if they were worried with who they had at the depth, not to say that that's not an argumentative point, but if they were worried, I feel like they would have done a move like this already.
Ryan, do you see them doing it?
Yeah.
Not necessarily Landon Collins, but generally, anything bringing a safety guy.
I could see them potentially bringing a safety, maybe depth or a young name that they see some potentials. I don't see Landon Collins. It's wild to even think Landon Collins was a, first team All-Pro, 3-time Pro Bowler, and is only 29 years old, and the guy can't get on a roster. So that's wild. But yeah, as to Jake's point, and what you guys alluded to nicely about John Johnston is, if they don't see these guys as being the starter next to Derwin, then you're going to go after maybe a no-name guy that might be able to kind of carve a rollout in depth, but Landon Collins probably isn't going to be that guy.
Yeah, I actually brought up another name maybe a week ago or so, but Dron Harmon is a pretty darn good tackler, good run defender. That could be a safety I can see the Chargers going after. But I think if they do go after a safety, it will probably end up being after this game. I don't think they'd wait until after number 3.
This isn't a safety, but are you guys surprised they haven't brought back Bryce Callahan? I can't believe that guy's still out there.
I can't believe he's still out there. I can believe they haven't brought him back just because like they have a pretty good depth, especially with J.C. Jackson back. But
may not be
it
out there
blows
for
my
long.
mind. It blows my mind. But didn't he just go to?
He visited the Dolphins. I didn't hear anything about the potential of them signing him, but
yeah, he has history with Vic. So
yep.
Question from Kyle. Got a couple good questions here. Who will be the little known name that breaks out today? I didn't even know Dotson existed until last week.
This is a good question.
Yeah.
Keelan Dotson's a good name. I said Hightower.
Yeah.
But I think those two names are both kind of known now.
I'll just go because I've said it 3 times, I think, today. I'll go Michael Ezike. I think he actually gets some grabs and gets known.
The little known name that will break out today. You know, I'll still go with my heart in this. One of my favorite undrafted free agents, like I've already said his name on this show, Gerard Clark. Almost got that sack last week. It was a great penetration through a double team that he created that pressure. Yeah, I'd like to see a standout performance from him today. That'd be nice.
Don't look now, but I'm gonna call my shot again with Taiwan Mullen. I think you're gonna see something. I was banging the drum for him.
He'll see a lot of snaps today, that's for sure.
Yep. I like that. Question came in. I gotta find it. Where'd it go? Can you guys talk about midlife crisis? Can you guys talk about the extreme depth at wide receiver with Hightower and Pokey Wilson and Davis and Guyton and so on, all behind our big three? Do some of these guys get signed somewhere else? We did talk about this earlier on in the show, but in short, they go deep. In short, they will get signed off the practice squad or off the practice squad if the Chargers end up putting some of them on it. Like we said, Jake, you've talked about this. Once it comes time to 53-man roster cuts, regardless, there is not a single scenario in which every single Chargers fan is not pissed off about something. And us included, because there will be good players who will not make this team. Brace yourself. And it's going to suck. But that points to how good the depth of this team is. But 100%, one of those wide receivers can be one of them.
Here's a fun question that puts you guys on the spot. Who is a name that would be a surprising cut that you could see potentially happening? It would piss you off. Who's the Austin Prohl of 2023? That was my guy 2 years ago.
Okay, so I said Trey McKitty. I'm not sure that would piss me off, but I think that could be a surprise name.
I mean, if Elijah Dotson obviously continues to ball out, that would be a hard pill to swallow. Gerard Clark for me, and I'm not trying to pound the table for Gerard Clark, but I think that a guy with those type of measurables and what he was known for in college, just to add in a little bit of depth behind a defensive line that really is pushing an emphasis towards and need be to stopping the run, I think that he would be a nice piece towards the back end of that position group. God, even when you talk about the edge, even when you go past 1, 2, 3, 4, you could see some guys that have been starting to make some waves there as well. That might be a hard one to cut if they continue to perform over these next 2 weeks. That's tough. Cam Smith is another one, Dan, that we didn't even talk about, who was actually one of the more impressive secondary players last week. I really liked what I saw from him in the first preseason game for the limited number of snaps that he got. It's tough.
Cam Brown?
Cam Brown.
Or I'm sorry, Cam Brown. I said Cam Smith. Excuse me.
That was my guy. I was going to say Cam Brown would be one that I really like what I've seen, but it's just they're deep. So
essentially anybody from that wide receiver, defensive back, or interior defensive line group, those are pick any one of them towards the bottom of that part of the depth chart, and that might make you upset.
A question came in earlier asking what the depth at running back is going to be. Who are the 3 that are going to make it? Do any of us think it's not going to be Kelly, Spiller, and Ekeler?
No.
If it was 3.
If it was 3, those have to be the 3.
Okay. Eddie, we're wrapping up here. We're probably on our last 5 or 10 minutes here. Eddie, again, if you guys have any questions, last minute, we'll try to go rapid fire as we close out the show. And shout out to the Chargers fans. You guys showed up. It's almost as if there's a hurricane or tropical storm that's keeping everybody at home and we can't do anything but just sit here and virtually tailgate together. Fantastic. Ryan Dyrud repping the 4th and Staley t-shirt, by the way. Get those at the LAFB merchandise, the store. We'll probably have the link in the description here after the show, which we're going to have some other merchandise coming up pretty soon about one Kellen Moore. That's going to look sick. Can't wait to see that one. Bold prediction. Question mark, exclamation point. LEEP Chargers versus Cowboys for Super Bowl, and Kellen Moore takes down his old team. That'd be fun.
Cowboys aren't making the Super Bowl.
I was going to say that's bold enough inserting the Cowboys into a Super Bowl prediction.
Okay, Steve
Chargers
Smith.
into
Leo asks, how many cut players would the Rams pick up? Ryan?
I could see a few because the Rams are just, they're a super young team. So it's kind of been the Chargers have taken some of the Rams. I don't want to call them leftovers, but like past Rams players. And so maybe this is the year that reverses. The Rams go some past Chargers players.
Jorge Rodriguez says, does the shirt read something like more, please? Oh, Jorge. It's better than that. I promise. I think it's better than that. Leandre says, losing, parenthesis, Hightower would suck because Guyton is a favorite for some reason. He reminds me of Brian Still, SMH. Guys, are you concerned about Guyton not being on this team? Not necessarily for Guyton, but for the team. Does his absence at this point impact the team?
Does it impact the team? If the Chargers didn't have Quentin Johnston or a Darius Davis because of the speed aspect that Jalen Guyton has, then yeah, you might be able to say that that's correct. But impacting this team the way it's looked right now, no. And a guy like John Hightower has reaped the benefits of him not being in camp with how he has performed this far. Best ability is availability. And yeah, I think a lot of us are kind of shocked that Jalen Guyton is still not off the PUP list. So we'll see what that ultimately looks like when he's ready to come back. I'm not sure if the Chargers ultimately end up keeping him over these next 2 weeks, considering who's been performing at the wide receiver spot for them this camp. Because literally, Dan, we've said this. How many times have we watched the training camp where not your first wide receiver, not your second wide receiver, not your third wide receiver, not your fourth wide receiver, but 5 guys at that wide receiver position, hell, even questionably 6, have all been making plays in training camp. Like that's just too hard not to overlook.
I don't disagree with you. Question came in. Michael Cunningham. Any chance we see Staley go back to his 4th and Staley form again this year with his job potentially on the line? I felt like he let the media dictate his aggression last year. This is a little beefy. Jake.
I think this is the year that Brandon Staley puts it together as a head coach. I really do. And I have not minced words with Brandon Staley. I think that he has done great things culturally for this team in terms of his message that he sends across. In terms of questionable coaching decisions, has he made some bad ones? Yes, he has. And he's owned up to all of those bad decisions. But I think that the coaching staff that he now has in place, especially with a guy like Kellen Moore, I think you're going to see this offense work much more efficiently. And you've already heard the message been sent by whether it's Brandon Staley, by Derek Ansley, by Kellen Moore, aggression. So do you see 4th and Staley all the time? No, I won't go that far. But yeah, you'll probably see it a lot more than what we saw last year.
Ryan? You repping that shirt more this year?
I mean, what's funny is I randomly know this number just because I looked it up a while ago because I've heard this a lot. In his first season, he had 34 4th down attempts. Second season last year, 29. So only 5 difference. So granted, and in his first season, 5 of those came in that last game against the Raiders in that 2 drives at the end of the game. So in reality, he did exactly the same amount from year 1 to year 2. That's just the media for you, loving to just decide different narratives that they decide on. But overall, I think we didn't lose the 4th and Staley. Maybe situationally it was a little different. We didn't see as many 4th and 2 go for it on their own 19-yard line. We didn't see as many, but you have that Browns game in week 3 or 4 when they went forward and then, they ended up missing the kicks. They solved it. So I think he is who he is. In my opinion, he hasn't changed a whole lot. I think he got smarter last year. And then I think to Jake's point, this is the year that it really all comes together. I mean, I've said a lot, year 3 of a first-time coach is the year you kind of see what you have. And so I think this is the year he has the roster he wants, has the defense. He has the offensive coordinator now. There's no excuses. He's got 2 years under his belt of learning. So I think to answer the question, does he get back to what he was? I think he's still going to always be aggressive. That's who he is. That's the identity and the culture he's built with his team. But he'll just probably be more rational about it, not when they're back to their own end zone. So, which is good, which is what we don't want.
I may actually disagree with you a little bit, Ryan, on this one.
Please disagree.
I think you saw a Brandon Staley last year that was up against it all season. And I think, to put the human into this for a second, remember like what this guy had to go through, like as a coach last year, kind of keeping things together, given like first off week 2, you saw, or whatever it was, all the injuries start to pile up, and then Justin Herbert gets the rib card of this thing, and then you start seeing the offensive line go down, and then receivers are down, and then your interior defensive line go down. Like they had to weather not just the storm, but like the storms, and it was a uphill climb. And then not until we got to that like Miami game, then the Giants game, like then we started to see them kind of cook a little bit. I don't necessarily think that. I'm trying to think of how to say this, but like I don't think he had time to be that aggressive guy, because like they were trying to like scratch and claw to win it somehow, let alone like get fancy. And so they didn't really have all of the resources to do some of those ballsy 4th and Staley decisions like they did maybe the year prior. I think this year it's like an embarrassment of riches where they've got playmakers that they can give the ball on 4th down to all over the place. And they got an offensive coordinator who can get them the ball all over the place. And I think this year, this seems like the effort year for Brandon Staley. And Jake said this is the year he kind of sees it put together. I think I agree with him, but I think this is the year where Brandon Staley says, you know what? If I'm going down swinging. I'm going down having fun. And so I do
Hasn't
think.
he done that already, though?
But I don't think.
Done that.
But I don't think year
That's the
one,
criticism
yes.
he's gotten.
Year 1, yes. I think year 2, I think the criticism people had was that he got too conservative.
And to your point, he didn't really have the talent to be aggressive. So that's true.
It's hard. So I think you're going to see a fun ass Chargers team this year. Let's see. Let's get to the last questions before we head out of here. If we miss the playoffs or lose in the wild card round, is Staley on the hot seat?
He already is on the hot seat. He already is on the hot seat.
It's probably
Dan just said, this is make or break, because one way or another, Kellen Moore is going to be a head coach of a team. Could it be the Chargers if this situation ends up happening? Maybe. But we'll see. This is definitely a playoff win. I'm not just saying playoffs or bust. This is playoff win or bust for Brandon Staley.
I think he knows it. Honestly, I think everyone knows it. Ryan, do you see any scenario in which he's back with the team if they don't win a playoff game?
To the first part, if they miss the playoffs, absolutely not. That's done if they miss the playoffs. If they go in, and depending what that game looks like, if it's another bad loss like the last one or a blown loss, then no. If it's just a hard-fought game, maybe injuries or God forbid something happens. So I don't know. I hard to predict someone getting fired for losing a playoff game or not winning a playoff game. But it would be, I'll go with this in odds. It would be a 70% chance he would not be back if they don't win a playoff game. But it's not 100%. But 100% if they don't make the playoffs.
Yes, long way to go before we have those conversations. But for now, in less than 2 hours, we got a football game. Chargers versus the Saints, preseason game number 2. Gentlemen, Ryan, Jake, any last-minute thoughts, topics, things that must be said before we let the folks get back to their drinking, to their tailgating, to their eating, to their sleeping, to whatever they're doing? Anything else? We want to talk about the great friends before we head out?
No. Last thing I'll say, I'm kind of excited to see if Max Duggan, how he's improved. If we see more TCU Max Duggan or more try to be, in the pocket Max Duggan. So, excited to see kind of what he can do. And I think Easton Stick's obviously QB2, but just for fun's sake, let's see what the old Maxwell winner can do.
Mr. Jake Hefner. Last minute thoughts.
Let's play football.
Ooh, Jake, if you're playing football like at this age, Jake Hefner, what position are you playing? Or what position are you playing the best, I should say?
Long snapper. I'm 38 years old and I feel like I'm 46. Okay. Even though the best thing that's probably happening to me as a long snapper is I'm getting canned by the defender trying to leap over me. So yes, put me in the least most physical thing that you could possibly think about there. Hell, I'll take a water boy job at this gig.
Ryan, I know you used to be a receiver. What are you doing now?
I mean, I was going to say water boy, but then Jake had to say that at the end of his soliloquy. So, yeah, I mean, if it's, are you saying like what would be my dream spot or like what I could actually physically do right now?
The one that you would be best at right now.
Like the guy that stretches everyone out, like rubs their thighs. I'd be the thigh rubber.
You'd be the physical therapist. Yeah.
Bring it
But
back.
I'm not even smart enough to be a
9-inch
physical
dicker
therapist.
over here.
Yeah, exactly. I'll stroke the ego of 9-inch dicker. So,
God. Okay. I'm gonna go QB3. That's my job. I can rock that. Clipboard God for sure.
Clipboard.
Yes. All right. Look, this has been fun. We had a ton of folks in the comments. Appreciate all of you guys, gals, children of all ages. Do us a favor, please hit the like, subscribe on YouTube. Also, go check out all that we're doing at LAFB. Again, Rams, Trojans, Bruins, and Chargers, all covered. LAFB. For Ryan Dyru, Jake Hefner, Dan Wolkenstein, LAFB, and Chargers Unleashed. This has been fun. Enjoy the game. We'll talk to you guys next on Chargers.